Hey guys, I'm DM Zone. This is Gamers Oasis. Let's get into it. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about the fighter class from original Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I found the term fighter and the term fighting man to basically be interchangeable. The fighting man was kind of like the overtext, and then when they talked about what it was, they were calling it a fighter basically routinely. So when you're wanting to know this type of thing, realize you're probably going to see both of these terms at the same time, and that's okay. The inspiration for this class, for sure, came books like Farhadin the Grey Mouser, Conan the Barbarian, or Destroyer, whatever you want to say. Certainly came from the pulp fictions of like the early 1930s to 1950s or so. Many sci-fi stuff like that actually could be found in there and that type of thing. Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax were both huge fans of this, as well as many of their players. And I'm not talking about Pulp Fiction like the movie, like they had a movie like that back then. Pulp Fiction was actually a type of book, like a digest or like a novel or whatever. It was just made of thick, coarse pulp-like paper, which you could feel, which is why it was called a pulp fiction. So fighters are found originally in the Men in Magic book, Book 1. It's one of the more simpler classes at first glance. It looks like it's not as complex because, well, there's no magic of any type. There's no divine magic. There's no arcane magic. Sort of. We'll get to that in a second. But the fighter side of things doesn't actually have that. Elves do. Where the fighter really shines through, though, is in the other aspects of it. It has more options for weapons that are magical or non-magical. And by the way, those are two separate things in this game. They have far better hit points potential. They have far better armor class potential. And it's the only class that could be played by all races at that point in time. There was a subclass for a fighter that came out called the Paladin, but that's a different thing. We're going to talk about that more in its own video. Fighter also seems to be the baseline for the other classes as they were designed. They often refer back to the fighter when they're talking about different things, and when they talk about the races, they talk about the fighter a lot. This is a very common thing. Dwarves could get to 6th level, which is called a Myrmidon. They're naturally more resistant, counting as 4 levels higher. So at 1st level, they count as a 5th level fighter. Again, pretty awesome. However, because they only get to 6th level and the human can get to 14th, technically the human would end up with a better magic resist and whatnot than even the dwarf would. They were the only class that could fully utilize the Warhammer +3, utilizing all the thrown hammer stuff and the returning and all that. This is actually a pretty mega deal. It's a pretty big deal considering how powerful that item was and how rare powerful items like that really were. Dwarves in general are just one of the stronger demi-humans, and this comes down to a lot of their core abilities. In the Greyhawk book, Supplement 1, there is actually, and I'm going to get more into that book later in its own video, but there are some corrections. And one of the corrections they have is whenever you're fighting giant type classes, so trolls, ogres, true giants, this type of stuff, you get +1 to hit. Again, hit equals a wound or death. Okay, so very big deal, especially when you're looking at like mass combat and you're rolling a d6, or if you're doing man-to-man combat or fantasy combat and you're trying to roll 2d6 and get over a certain number. That +1 could actually be very meaningful. If you're using the chainmail rules in the fullness, things get a little weird quickly. For example, they talk about the fact that dwarves take half damage from giant types. So if you get hit 4 times instead of taking 4 hits, you only take 2 hits. If you get hit 3 times, you take 1. Whoa, big difference, huge difference. There's something I would probably treat more as a role play because I don't want to be compelled to do certain types of behavior. But in this, they also talk about basically an extreme hatred towards goblins, and you have to make an obey type of command, like you're going to follow orders versus charging off because you see goblins off ahead of you. Also, they get infravision, which is very good. But I will go more into what dwarves are, get, and all of those type of things when I actually talk about dwarves in their specific video. Because I feel like there's more there for all the classes than just what I'm talking about here with fighters. Halflings also can be fighters. They level cap at 4, which is actually hero. They are magic resistant, just like a dwarf is. They actually consider them to be dwarf-like in this nature. In their core class, in the core books, they can't change their class to anything else like a thief. But that does change later on, and they do open up more options for other classes later on. One of the huge changes, though, when you come out with the corrections that are in the Greyhawk book is halflings are super good with slings, and they actually get a +3 to hit, which, again, is insane. If you refer back to the chainmail books and decide to use those books, again, halflings have a lot of special ability. They are literally considered invisible when they're in the wilderness. When they're in a wilderness environment, they cannot be seen, they cannot be found, they cannot be tracked. I personally feel like that's a little too much. I give them a 2 in 6 chance to be able to hide, which is something they did later in other editions of the game. I just feel like that's a little bit more reasonable. However, notably missing from the halfling is infravision. They have human sight. They don't get that extra little benefit. That's crazy to me a little bit. Now with the other two races known, let's talk about elves. Elves are the third demi-human type that is found in the core books. They are basically considered multi-class, which means they are considered both fighter and magic user. They can utilize one or the other within the same adventure, but they can't do it within the same day or game session. Essentially, they choose to be a fighter. Next week they can choose to be a magic user, whatever their choice is. I treat it like this because this is not anywhere in the rules, but I treat it as you get half XP for both classes. So you get 500 XP, fighter gets 250, magic user gets 250. You get the 4th level fighter, which is your cap. Guess what? You still get 250 for your magic user and you get nothing for your fighter. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. Why? Because elves are ridiculously powerful. So in the Greyhawk correction section, they get +1 to hit with bows or swords. Wow. Just across the board, they're getting +1 to hit on everything if they use a bow or a sword. Pretty much they can guarantee to have that +1 to hit, and that's pretty incredible. Also, if you're using the chainmail rules, it gets even crazier. For example, elves can turn invisible whenever they want. Not like a halfling that has to be in a certain type of environment. They can just do it. And unless they have some ability to detect them, you can't detect the elf, which is crazy. And they can uncloak themselves and attack in the same turn. Also, they can perform something called split move or fire, which means that they can move and then shoot, which is something unique to elves. They have, in addition, their own separate bonuses they get for the fantasy combat chart. If you're not on the fantasy combat chart, you're not a level 4 hero, you have no business fighting a thing like a troll or a giant or an ogre because you cannot kill it unless you have a magic weapon. Elves can. Elves kill trolls with 3 hits. Now, if they're a 4th level hero, they kill it in 1 hit. Wow. Well, that's pretty incredible. They treat enchanted arrows as if they're heroes when they're in combat with things on the fantasy chart. So again, they shoot a troll with a magic arrow. They can kill it at 1st level. That is crazy. Magic swords also have special benefits for being in the hands of the elf. I kind of went over that already, but you can understand how that would be very powerful in the situations. They also have infravision like dwarves. They're also immune to ghoul touch, which isn't actually a touch. It's more of an aura, but whatever. Both of these things are massive, and both of these things are pretty much unique to elves. Humans are a lot less cool, not quite so flashy, but they are a lot more pedestrian, a lot more typical and standard. You're going to find them everywhere. They also can reach 14th level, as I said, making them pretty cool. They have the best saves actually in the game later on. They'll have the best most amount of attacks, where a dwarf can only get 6 attacks because they're a level 6 fighter. A human can get up to 14 attacks because they're a level 14 fighter. So yeah, they do end up being more powerful in the end. It's just they don't have the same start as everyone else does. I also feel like it's worth stating that in the Supplement 1 Greyhawk book, there are several things that really bring up the power level of a fighter. If you're going to allow fighters in your game, which everyone should, you should allow Supplement 1 as a minimum. The reason why is there are some things in there that really kind of put the fighter on par with a wizard. Now, not all fighters, but some for sure. Let me go over some of those things. First of all, it allows the paladin as an optional subclass of the fighter. Super nice. But my favorites are percentile strength. That unlocks certain open doors. Very nice. Also, improved AC if you have high dexterity. So if you actually are a decently statted character, you have a lot of options now that other classes just do not have access to. If you're not a fighter, you don't get the percentile strength. You don't get the bonus to AC. That gives them something that is unique to a fighting class. Also, in the supplement 1, you have half-elves. Half-elves are basically like elves as they were, except they trade a little bit of magic levels for some fighter levels. So they can't quite get as high on the magic side of things, but they can get higher in the fighter side of things. You're not capped at 4. Super nice. Also, higher stats in general give you the ability to raise your character's level beyond what it is. So let's say you have an 18 strength and you go up to level 8 fighter as a dwarf. Well, now you're considered a level 14 or level 12, instead of 14 for human for the saves. That's pretty nice. However, I'll get a lot more into the Greyhawk bonuses when I actually do the video for Greyhawk. Blackmoor, Supplement 2, and Eldritch Magic have some things in there, not really pertaining to the fighter specifically. I mean, hit locations maybe. I really don't like hit locations. I feel like it's an unnecessary burden to try and manage. But anyways, guys, if you want to see more videos like this, if I missed something, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you think of something that I don't have already planned, I will give you credit when I make that video. Thank you. I hope you guys have a great day and keep rolling those dice.